Welcome friends to my new channel with another video. As always, if you enjoy these videos, please make sure to hit subscribe button. Redditors, what is your worst forced to work on a holiday story? Worked every single holiday for 2.5 years at my old job because my family lived in town and my co-workers' families did not, and I don't have many friends, so it didn't bother me. Asked for one holiday off and got called into a meeting where I was told they were disappointed in me for asking when other people with real families and children needed the holiday off. After pointing out I worked every holiday in the last 2.5 years, they let me off. After, I was written up for causing a disturbance, not being a team player. Edit. For comments, PMs asking why I didn't try to sue or report them, etc. It was a shitty part-time college job, though it was not work study, but they somehow treated it like it was and fixed the hours so no one ever could be counted as full-time aside from management, and I couldn't afford to lose it at the time as I had to pay off college classes and I lived where I worked and had nowhere else to go. It didn't affect any raises, promotions, or what have you because there were none whatsoever. They never once in my time there promoted anyone. Any new people came in from outside the company, though we were all welcome to interview for the position. I could probably write you all a book on the horrible shit they pulled on all of us in my last year there, but I won't go into it. They were a nice place to work in the beginning until management was changed and until it got ridiculous. I had a great time working there. I was sorry to see it end, the great time part, not the working there part, and the company, well, that branch, anyway, is now struggling, as my co-worker quit when I did. One quit right before that before they could refuse to renew his contract. They fired another one for what I feel is an invalid reason, and fired one for what actually was a valid reason, but was 3 years overdue. This wasn't Thanksgiving, but I had made plans one Memorial Day to take my family kayaking for the first time. They were only going if I go. Kayak rentals reserved for everyone, plans made, babysitters lined up. Then I was told by my boss that everyone was required to work on Memorial Day, no exceptions. I told him of my plans, but he didn't care. We had to cancel everything last minute. On Memorial Day, my boss dropped by my job site. He happened to mention that only about 5 people were out working today, out of 40-ish. I gave him a what the fuck look. Turns out, Memorial Day was a mandatory work day for about a day, then it was changed to voluntary. I was never told the difference, and despite my objections the entire week leading up to Memorial Day, the boss still maintains that he told me of the change, and I voluntarily worked. Worked for USPS. I was forced to clean an annex building on Christmas. No one had been there for days, so there was literally nothing to do. I sat in the break room and tried to watch infomercials, only channel they got because there was no internet access. Called in to ask to go home and I was told it was vital that I be there. I was dispatched at a security company and my boss at the time instructed me to let all our guys know that they wouldn't be getting holiday pay, illegal, because they were seasonal workers, all full-time employees, and our contracts didn't pay any extra for holidays. I got a call from a client complaining about how we had charged double time and a half for holidays and discovered that particular site was paying approximately 3 times the wage our guard was receiving. Part of my job was relaying messages to my boss, so I got the lovely task of trying to explain to my drunk boss in Mexico that a client was unhappy with how much we were charging him extra for holiday pay, and then I had to also relay to him that some guards were complaining about how we weren't giving extra holiday pay. My boss drunkenly reminded of how our sites don't pay extra for holidays and to let the guards know that. Like, right after I told him about how we charged $120 per hour instead of the approximately $42 an hour that they had expected. To pay a guy $13 an hour to sit there and miss Christmas. I worked in the call center of the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, one of Australia's 4 large and vastly wealthy banks. They did not pay any public holiday loading, they just gave you time in lieu, so if for example you worked on Australia Day, you would be given time that you could use to take a different day off without using your normal holiday leave. Not for Christmas though. Instead of being rostered to work a full day, I was rostered to work a half day, and that paid for you to have the other half of the shift off. So I worked on Christmas Day for 4 hours, spoke to the worst customers I have ever had to deal with, and got absolutely nothing for it. They were the fucking worst. I got there at 9 AM, and the dream that started at 8 AM had already had 2 calls that ended in tears. That normally only happened maybe once a week. I had a guy bitching about monthly account fees that he just noticed. I had a lady ring up for an account balance and then say how horrible it was that they made us work on Christmas and miss out on family time. I was so over it by then that I told her that the only reason I had to work was because of people like her calling up to do what she could have done through self-service or net banking. The few nice people apologized for calling and said things like, well, at least you are getting double or triple time today. In my country, men are supposed to serve in the military for 6 months when they come of age. I got to serve as a guard soldier and had a 24-hour work shifts every 3rd day. I was on duty on my birthday and on New Year's Eve, which are exactly 3 days apart, and sometime after midnight my supervisor came up to me and asked if he can have a piece of the cake in the fridge. My mom made it for my birthday. Of course I agreed, because you wouldn't say no to your supervisor. He took the cake, came up to me and said, "That's some damn good cake. Why would you have something like that with you?" So I told him about my birthday and the cake and he laughed and said, "I just found out that my wife was cheating on me for years and it still seems like I am the one having a good day here, thanks for the cake, soldier." Then he pat me on the back and went to sleep. Worked in a pub that was serving Christmas dinner. The chefs got blind drunk and physically couldn't cook, so of course all the food was sent back and we had to refund a lot of grumpy people. To top it off, we didn't get any extra pay for working Christmas Day and because the food was so awful we didn't get any tips either. Worked graveyard shift on New Year's Eve at Waffle House one year. Some drunk lady came in and started complaining to a waitress, Michelle, that her pork chops were too done or undercooked or something, I don't remember which. But instead of asking Michelle to fix the pork chops, this lady tried screaming in her face and arguing that she wanted the entire meal comped. Big mistake. What this lady didn't know was that Michelle didn't take shit from nobody and she was a fucking human tank and if you set her off she would black out and go ape shit on everything in her path. Lady threw her hot coffee on Michelle. Michelle grabbed a glass of water, threw it at the lady, then proceeded to jump on this lady and repeatedly punched this lady in the face until she begged for mercy from Michelle's wrath. One of the cooks had to physically restrain Michelle and he took a few good hits to stop this from getting any worse than it was. Michelle was fired the next day. Saw her again a few months later. I was walking down the street, she pulled up in her car and offered me a ride, which I obliged. Such a shame, because she was a super nice lady. I don't have children so normally I don't make too much fuss about working holidays, but this particular year I hadn't seen my mom in 3 years and she was coming to town. I asked my boss for the 25th off but offered to work Christmas Eve and New Year's. I got re-aimed and told my coworker who has adult children needed Christmas off to be with her kids. Too bad I ended up getting Christmas off anyway because I just didn't show up that day. Quitting that minimum wage shit show was long overdue, I just needed a push. I went to work on New Year's Eve and ended up being 5 minutes late. I was trying to drive through the middle of town to get to work so I didn't call ahead since it was only a bit of time and I had never been late before. I got fired. It had a lot to do with manager favoritism I believe and I was hired at a better paying job in a week. I worked for a small town radio station newsroom. There were no newscasts on Christmas Day, but being at the bottom rung of the ladder meant I had to get up at 4 a.m. Christmas morning for 3 years and go to the station and record weather forecasts for the day. It didn't take long, but getting up at 4 a.m. is just awful. But if you ever want to see streets at their emptiest, try 4:30 a.m. on Christmas morning. I used to work security at a building for the 3 to 11 p.m. shift. One year for Thanksgiving my family was doing a later dinner during when my shift was and I found out the 7 a.m. 3 p.m. shift guard was going to miss his family's dinner because they were doing it early. We agreed to switch shifts for that day so we could both do dinner with our families. I worked his 7-3 shift and then he never showed up. Called him repeatedly and he didn't answer so an hour into the next shift I called my boss. Pretty much was told tough luck there's nobody else that can come in today and we can't leave the building without coverage. So I ended up working 16 straight hours on Thanksgiving, not seeing any of my family and eating Chinese food from one of the only places open that delivered. I had mono and was recovering from pneumonia. I woke up Christmas Eve feeling like absolute fucking death, with a sore throat that felt like shards of glass. But I was working both Eve and Christmas Day so I couldn't back out without being an asshole, or so I was led to believe by management. Went to work in the ed and grabbed a mask. The doc I'm working with takes one look at me and does a rapid strep and pulls some strings to do a culture. The rapid is negative, but he writes me a script for penicillin anyways and tells me to get some tea on my way to the hospital's apothecary. I finish the day out and see my boss on the way out who asks if I'm coming in the next day because he really doesn't want to cover. He was a bit of a jerk in the interaction and I nearly started to cry. I had mono, pneumonia and culture was positive, strep. I called in for Christmas Day, then had my tonsils removed January 8 for obstructing my airway. I left that job less than a year later because they couldn't get over why I would call in and make them cover my Christmas shift. Worked Thanksgiving weekend in college as the overnight desk clerk for a well-known hotel chain. A woman stormed to the front desk absolutely irate that I locked her out and allowed a stranger access to her room to take a shower. And she suggested I stole her luggage when I opened her room for another guest. None of this would ever happen. I figured she had been trying to enter the wrong room and asked for her keycard to see if there was a mix-up. She threw the keycard across the desk at me. It was the keycard for another hotel chain. She had the wrong room and the wrong hotel card to enter her room. I was a bit shaken, but politely pointed this out. She apologized to me later, which I appreciated because those who work in customer service know apologies are few and far between.